Alright, so we've got pocket sixes in the cutoff here. Get an open raise from early position. This is a pretty loose aggressive player. Voluntarily puts money in the pot 21% of the time, which is pretty standard. But a 16% raise, 6% 3-bet, both on the high end. I've played 8,000 hands at the same table as this player, so obviously a regular. This player is pretty much a break-even player in the time that we've spent at the same table anyway. Get another, kind of passive seeming player makes a call here from middle position. This player threw 179 hands, voluntarily put money in the pot 23% of the time, 6% raise, 8% 3-bet, but through 179 hands, that's a pretty small sample size. I do elect to go ahead and call. In hindsight, so I'm looking at the 3-bet stats for the players behind me, which is important anytime you consider a call. Villain on the button, 5%. Player in the small blind, I don't have many stats on. Player in the big blind, pretty tight aggressive, but 5% 3-bet. So, you definitely run the risk of getting squeezed there. If it were a spot where there were, say, an additional caller, and this is something that would happen live more often, but if say there's an open raise from early position and 2 callers, and the players to your left don't 3-bet very often, pocket 6 is a hand I would absolutely just call with, because you can just set mine. I'm not a huge fan of set mining. I think pocket pairs actually, like whenever you play heads up, even like the smaller pocket pairs can be good a lot of the time. To call a c-bet with and kind of just pot control and continue with when you don't hit your set, and you can win at showdown a fair amount of the time against this ace or king high type hands that your opponent might get with. Pairs aren't, you're not going to make a pair every time. So heads up, I think it's fine, especially if you're playing against a loose raise, like a late position raise, something like that. And I think if you're in the big blind, and there's multiple callers, something like that, you're closing the action, it's probably fine to set mine. But again, I think people maybe think that they're getting the right odds to set mine, but whenever you really look at it, if you're planning on just hitting a set and getting all your money and trying to get all your money in versus just fold if you don't hit it, you need to be getting paid off, 8 to 1, 9 to 1, 10 to 1, to be able to make it worth it, and you're just not going to be getting paid off that well usually. Also, sometimes you may run into a better hand, like straights and flushes and things like that do happen. Set over set does happen. Also, a lot of the time you just check raise a c-bet and they fold, and you're not getting the implied value you thought you would. So anyway, I do opt to go ahead and call, and I do hit my set, and this is kind of an interesting spot because we have potential for straights on the board. There's also flush draw potentials on the board. So the initial raiser here checks, the caller bets. I opt to call, thinking maybe I can keep the initial raiser in the hand here. I mean, I don't necessarily want to keep the initial raiser in the hand. It's a weird spot because I kind of want to check raise, or not check raise, just raise the bet here for protection, but I don't want to raise into a straight or a bigger set. But whenever you really look at this hand, okay, you have bottom set, but the combinations of hands that are behind you that are going to call, like there's way more combinations of hands that are behind you than that are ahead of you. So what's ahead of you right now? 9-10, 4-5. 9-10 definitely possible for this player. I think that's part of my hesitation there. But there are a lot of flush draws that are going to call whenever you make a big bet, and even if you do mathematically price them out, especially like a shorter stacks player who's probably not necessarily a good regular who made this bet here. So and I mean maybe things like pocket nines will call if you put a big bet in. 7-8, 6-7, stuff like that. But I do opt to be a little bit more cautious here and just go ahead and call. Figuring I'm in position, I can just kind of reevaluate as the other player continues to bet, what they do. The turn checks through, and I think, my logic with checking it back was just looking at any 9 now has a straight, and this player could be getting a little bit cagey, so I'm fine to just pot control here. And then we get the jack. So villain needs a 9 to have a straight. There's no flush draw on the board. We're not. So it's, we're in a good spot. We're going to win the majority of the time here, probably capping our value. I think we could have gotten more value, likely. But also, we raised the flop. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting spot. Had we raised the flop, we likely could have just jammed on this opponent since they weren't very deep stacked. And they probably would have called, even though they probably weren't getting the right odds with their ace-king, and then scooped up, the other 29 big blinds, which is about $60 behind. So I think probably could have gotten more value in this spot. I think I played it a little bit passively there. I think, kind of an interesting spot with the pocket sixes pre-flop. I think it's one of those where you could either fold or call. I don't think you want to 3-bet into an early position raiser with the hand that marginal. I think for calling is probably fine there. Actually, you know what? I'll look up kind of whatever the GTO play is there from the cutoff. So cutoff versus an under the gun +1 raise. Pocket sixes is a call 23% of the time and a fold 77% of the time. I think as you get more additional callers, the implied value goes up. I'm assuming that would mean you want to call more often. But yeah, I mean, pocket sixes is a hand that, you probably really only want to play like if you're in the big blind facing a late position raise, or if you are in late position, it's fine to raise. Just really not that strong of a hand. So, I don't think I necessarily played this well, but I don't necessarily think I made a huge blunder here either. So, just kind of one of those marginal spots you get into.